Hi, if you were not here the week of March 22nd, this is another worksheet that we actually worked on. And this is standard 6G1. So what you're going to work on is finding the area for quadrilaterals. And so you're going to see a different variety of them. So this is our practice sheet. Okay, so I'm going to go through these one at a time. So first of all, as you can see, number one, this shape right over here is a square. So right here where it says type, you're going to have to label this. And a square is indicated that all the sides are the same. So if I take a look at S, this must be 70 and this must be 70. To find the area of a square, you can do two things. You can take its length times its width, which is the formula to find the area of a rectangle, or you can also use the formula S squared, which means you take your side and you square it. So to find out the area, we take 70 times 70, and our answer is going to be 4,900 square centimeters. Now remember, if you don't like using square centimeters, this abbreviation, you can also just go ahead and do centimeters and then using your exponent of 2. So remember, area always is just two-dimensional form, so its exponent will always be 2 as well. We're not going to be doing any of the perimeters, so you don't have to worry about any of that. Okay. The next shape that we have got over here is called a parallelogram. So I'm going to make sure that I've got that written down over here again. Okay. And in order to find the formula or the area of a parallelogram, we're just going to take its base times its height. Now, this shape right over here is very similar to a rectangle, except it's being squished. Okay. So we really don't have a length and a width. So that's why our formula is a little bit differently, base times height. And just as a little reminder, parallelograms have got two sides that are parallel from one another. So we can see that those two are parallel, as well as this side and this side. So yes, even a square is a parallelogram. Okay. So with our parallelogram, we have to do just something a little bit differently. So with our formula, our base is what it's actually sitting on. So we're going to take our C, which is 84. And this right over here is really important. It's our height. Height is the 90-degree angle that is perpendicular to our base. Most students always try to use the A, but remember, when you go to the doctor and he's measuring how tall you are, you do not stand slanted. You're standing up nice and straight. So the two things that we are going to go ahead and multiply is your H and your C. So when you do that, you get 4,032. And I'm going to use the square yards. Okay, pretty easy peasy. Now, number 3, it is, if you guys notice as well, it is also a parallelogram. So don't forget to go ahead and make sure you're writing parallelogram. Remember, we don't have to do the perimeter. Hopefully you remember the formula for a parallelogram, and it is base times height. So hopefully you know the 2 that you're going to multiply is C and the H. So when you multiply these two right over here, you're going to get 5,643 square yards. These are the easy ones. So squares, sides squared, as well as parallelograms, base times height. So really try to remember those. Now, number 4, you're going to see is very similar as well. This is a parallelogram as well. But to be more specific, it's actually called a rhombus. Now, rhombuses are squares, and I can see that because A and A right over here are the same variable. So that's indicating that these two sides must be exactly the same. So it's a square, except it is squished. So we have to still follow the formula for a parallelogram. Remember, base times height. If you try to use the square formula and you just say, oh, I'm just going to take 55 times 55, that's where we're going to get a little bit mixed up. Because remember, it's still a parallelogram. So my base is A, but my height, remember, is what I have to use, the one that's 90-degree angle. So when I multiply these two, I'm going to get 2,860, and I'll do feet squared because I can interchange them whenever I want to. Okay. Take a look at number 5. Pretty obvious that this shape is a rectangle. Okay, a rectangle is classified as a parallelogram as well, but with a rectangle, we know it's just length times width. You only have one length. You've got your width over here. When you multiply those together, you get 4,300 square millimeters. Easiest one on the page. Now, the next one is going to be a little bit challenging. This one is a trapezoid. So I'm going to go ahead and put that word right over here, trapezoid. And before I actually get into the formula, I want to show you something a little bit about trapezoids. And I'm trying to find some interesting colors here. So with a trapezoid, we actually have, if you notice, a little rectangle right over here. And then we actually have 2 triangles next to it. So this formula is going to be a little bit interesting. And the formula to do this, I'm going to put this nice and red here and also erase all of this. But the formula for a trapezoid, and try to remember this one as well, but it's B1 plus B2, and I'll explain what those actually are, over 2 times H. So if you can take a mental snapshot of that formula, it will serve you well, I promise. Okay. So B1 means it's your base 1. So this is your first base. It's what it's actually sitting on. Base 2, or B2, is your top one. And these are the ones that are parallel to one another. Those are your bases. Now, a lot of students get mixed up because they think that, oh, well, here's a base and here's a base. But remember, these are not parallel to one another. So those are not going to work. So always take a quick little look and make sure that you're not using the wrong numbers. Okay. So we're going to take and add B1 plus B2. But if you take a look down here, we've got A1, A2, B1, B2, and H. This worksheet is going to try to confuse you. Most 6th graders would automatically go right into this B1 and B2 and say, oh, that's it. But those are not your bases. It's A1 and A2. So what you're going to do is add these 2 values up. So you've got your 91 and 40. We got our 131. Then what you have to do is divide that number by 2. And then when we get our answer, we're then going to multiply it by our height. And remember, our height is our 90-degree angle that's perpendicular to our base. So we're going to multiply that by 52. So be very careful when you're putting this into your calculator. Do one step at a time. Add the 2 together, then divide that value by 2. Then that value, you multiply that all by H. So if you do this correctly, you will get 3,406 inches squared. And that's all you have to do in order to find the area of a trapezoid. Okay. Technically, what they do is what this formula actually really means is that you're finding the average of this base and this base. And when you find averages, you're dividing by how many you have, which is divided by 2, and then you're multiplying it by your height. So it's very similar to the area of a parallelogram. Okay, so let's finish this off real quick. Obviously, we know this is a trapezoid as well. Now, a trapezoid is not a parallelogram, so we can't use that formula. Remember, we only have one set of sides that are parallel to each other. So if you haven't remembered, B1 plus B2 divided by 2 times our height. So you got to do this step first, then take that, divide it by 2, get that answer, and then you're going to multiply it by your height. So if I look again, this is very similar. Our A1 and our A2 is our base 1 and base 2. So you're going to add your 90 and your 43. You're going to divide that value by 2. Then our height is 54. So then we're going to multiply that by 54. And our value is going to be 3,591 square feet. Now, before I forget, I also want to make sure I'm labeling this. Okay. So number 8, pretty easy. It's a parallelogram as well. So our formula, base times height. Our base A, our height is H. Remember, this is also considered a rhombus. So when you multiply these two values together, right over here, remember, you're not multiplying these two, okay, just the A and the H. So when you multiply that, you get 2,794.4 square centimeters. And for our last figure, this is our square, easiest one on here. So you can just do your sides squared. So I know if one side is 57, I know my other side must also be 57. Multiplying those together, we get 3,249 square millimeters. So for the graded side, it's going to be very similar to this. Just don't do any of the perimeters. And I've marked out the word perimeter, but the line is still there. If you need to use the area of parallelograms or polygons notes that I have uploaded in Google Chrome from last week, please go ahead and use that. But these are formulas that you really need to memorize. Yes, please use your calculator. Okay, so once you get the graded side done, please turn it in, and that way I can go ahead and get you your score. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thanks.